In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again. And some of you are probably wondering why I kicked off this video by saying the sign of the cross and the Hail Mary in Latin. Well, there's been a recent turn of events. It basically took place yesterday, but it didn't really hit the news rotation until today. I found out about it this morning while flipping the channels and coming across the story on Fox News. Apparently, a longtime abortion doctor by the name of Mr. George Tiller of Wichita, Kansas, has been killed, shot dead by a pro-life activist in the church that he ushers at. Now, I must begin my take on this turn of events by giving a little bit of a confession here. When I first heard about this, despite the fact that I found this to be a really horrible thing in basically all respects, what had just occurred, I found myself laughing hysterically at it. And before all of you come to the conclusion that I'm crazy here, I think I'm going to try to see if I can shed some light on why I reacted this way, even though my better sense told me that this wasn't a laughing matter. There is a certain irony, I think, to a person who spends his whole life attending church and professing to believe in something and then essentially doing the mirror opposite every other day and every other waking minute that he's outside of that church. And basically the only time where this person is living outside of the realm of this hypocrisy that he subjected himself to is when he's in that church, asking for forgiveness, holding steadfast to the beliefs of total depravity that Martin Luther himself espoused and came to hold. And in this 1 minute where he was free of his hypocrisy, another person basically engaged in a momentary fit of hypocrisy by, in the name of protecting life, taking a life. The event itself was just so utterly ironic that I couldn't help but laugh at it. And saints preserve us, I still to this moment am in a state of disbelief over it. So now that I've gotten that little confession out of the way, I'll just get into my thoughts on this, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. I tend to get long-winded when I talk about subjects like this. Dr. George Tiller is essentially an abortion doctor's abortion doctor based on what I've read about him. He was one of the few providers that was willing to do late-term abortions later than the 21st week of the term, which is later than what I think most countries in this world normally allow. I mean, America has some of the loosest standards regarding what's considered legal abortion. And he basically was active in making sure that the process would stay legal. And he believed in this procedure primarily because he believed that the advent of technology which basically made us able to see potential birth defects before they'd occurred. Basically, it justified us in sort of weeding out the lesser members of our species who had yet to be born. So in addition to being an abortionist, he was also a rank-and-file eugenicist in the same tradition as the founder of Planned Parenthood, the leadership in the Ford and the Rockefeller Foundation, and all of these other basically anti-Christian, Christian-hating organizations that have basically been pushing the same ideological viewpoint that basically inspired Hitler. Now, as horrible as I think this man's viewpoints are, or were, I should say that in the past tense, I am not one to condone using violence to get through to people like this. I think that as a general rule, evil begets evil, violence begets violence, and that the nature of the inherent hypocrisy that humanity suffers from through various metaphysical events makes us unable to be consistent in judging others in the way that this activist who killed this doctor chose to. And so I find myself in an interesting position. I guess you could call it a little bit nuanced, because on the abortion issue I tend to be pretty conservative, even though I tend to take the libertarian viewpoint that in spite of how much I don't like the practice of abortion, especially abortion on demand, and how much I really don't like it when our government subsidizes this stuff, I tend to take the Harry Browne viewpoint on it, which is our government is basically so insanely corrupt and hypocritical that there's no way that they could consistently enforce laws against this procedure. So I think that this is something where state governments, and actually not even state governments, I think the same problem exists there, but more local communities and hospitals themselves should be making the decisions, and that this should be treated for what it is, which is an occasional medical remedy for a pregnancy that might result in the death or irreparable harm of a viable mother. That's essentially what the purpose of an abortion is, or at least what it should be, as far as I'm concerned. And I also take the same viewpoint with the death penalty, although I think that there are some instances where the taking of the life of a criminal could be justifiable. I don't think that there is any government in this world that is free from hypocrisy enough that they could consistently enforce it and essentially carry it out. So I find myself in a position of a little bit of cognitive dissonance. I can't really say that I condone what happened. I don't. But at the same time, I can't really feel sorry for Dr. George Tiller. He essentially chose the profession that he found himself in the mid-1970s when this practice was made legal, and he decided that he was going to make his livelihood off of it. And the fact that he himself has fathered 4 children and is the grandfather of 10 grandchildren doesn't change this. How many children and grandchildren who would probably have otherwise lived viable lives were essentially prevented from living simply because they were seen as an inconvenience, or because they might not have grown to be as smart or as attractive or as physically fit as others might have? Because that's essentially the viewpoint of eugenics, and that's the one that he was espousing throughout his life. So feel free to take from this what you will, but from my end of things, this is unfortunate and, in a strange way, a little bit comically ironic that this has happened. Ah, well, it's a strange world we live in. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.